Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Shivani, one of the managers of mission initiatives at the National Eating Disorders Association. NEDA is a nonprofit organization working to fundamentally change the way eating disorders are understood and treated so those affected can achieve lasting recovery and well-being. Today, we're partnering with the American Dance Therapy Association to learn more about dance movement therapy and to go through a movement exercise known as brain dance. I'm so excited because today I'm joined by Lauren Peterson. Lauren is a dance movement therapist based in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Lauren began working with clients in a residential eating disorder facility in 2011 as part of her training in dance therapy through Pratt Institute. Lauren continues to work in residential, intensive outpatient, and outpatient settings. She's passionate about helping clients heal their relationships to their bodies through somatics and creative arts therapies. Lauren is a member of the American Dance Therapy Association and currently serves as treasurer. Thank you, Lauren, for being here with us today and for all that you do within the eating disorders community. I'd like to begin by learning more about the amazing work that you do. So, to get started, can you tell us a little bit more about what dance movement therapy is?
Sure. And thank you so much. I'm really excited to be able to come here and talk to you today about this field that I love. I wanted to read the new American Dance Therapy Association definition because we changed it recently and I don't have it 100% memorized. So in general, what we currently define dance movement therapy as in the American Dance Therapy Association is the psychotherapeutic use of dance, movement, body awareness, and embodied communication to foster healing and well-being for all individuals, families, and communities. And I like to share when I'm working with a client because many people have not heard of dance movement therapy or also called dance therapy. I like to share that this is a somatic form of psychotherapy and it's under the umbrella of the creative arts psychotherapies. Sometimes when I meet someone, they're not sure if I mean something like physical therapy or more like talk therapy. And the training is much more oriented towards using somatics, dance, and movement to help someone psychologically while we might also get a physical benefit.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Lauren. I think it's really helpful to know that distinction. And while we're talking about dance therapy, and how like it relates to eating disorders, I understand it can be a little tricky to kind of like discuss movement with folks that are directly dealing with an eating disorder. A lot of folks that have an eating disorder have a complex relationship with movement. So can you talk a little bit more about that experience and how you use dance movement therapy to help folks in their healing journeys?
Absolutely. I love working with clients who are struggling with an eating disorder because, on the one hand, movement can be incredibly powerful and transformational. And also, it can be triggering in some capacities. I personally think that that is an opportunity to really lean into recovery and notice how the movement directives are impacting the client. But sometimes that means that we pause and talk a little bit about what's coming up for them as they are invited to connect to their bodies and movement. So, what can happen briefly is that often, if movement has been utilized for a client who's struggling with an eating disorder, it often has been a place of disconnecting from the body rather than connecting to the body. So, for instance, someone might be over exercising, compulsively exercising. They might have a dance background and be really used to viewing their body as a tool, an instrument, but also possibly at times something to be manipulated and shaped in a certain way that might not actually be truly healthy for them. And so when we invite movement into eating disorder recovery from a really embodied somatic place that gives us the opportunity to learn how to use movement, which is great for humans, in a way that helps us connect to our whole self, our emotions, our joy, our expression, rather than using movement to disconnect us as we think about maybe calorie burning, or I have to get X amount of steps in, or something that comes from more of an arbitrary number rather than what our bodies really want in that moment.
Thank you. That's super helpful to know. And I think that for a lot of dancers, there's that pressure to be thinner. I think that for a lot of people within the dance culture, what they hear from their coaches and trainers is that, like, if they were able to look a certain way, they'd be more agile, which we both know is not true. People of different bodies can move in different ways. And so what do you think you would say to those coaches and trainers that still kind of like hound that message that thinner is better within the specific dance space?
That's such a great question. I think the first thing that comes up for me is a dancer being able to dance is better than a dancer not being able to dance. And so if that dancer and their body are not being properly fueled or given proper rest in order to recover from training, then we're looking at a shorter dance career. We're looking at fewer opportunities to move healthfully and artfully. And so I would say, first and foremost, to those folks who might have what I would consider kind of a more old school mentality towards dancers and their bodies, that we need sustainability and we need to be able to invest in the full person, which includes helping them not injure themselves or develop an eating disorder, which will be, as you know, a very complicated process to heal from.
Thank you. I think a lot of coaches and trainers need to know that. I think the fact that there's the push for restrictive behaviors and overexercise is really damaging to dancers and athletes because they're more prone to injury and just long-term health issues. So I think it's super important to let everyone know that you have to fuel your body in order to do the amazing creative things that you want them to do out there in that space. So I appreciate you highlighting that. And on the flip side, when it comes to the dancers themselves, what is one thing you'd say to someone to help reshift their relationship with movement?
Oh, great question. I would encourage, if someone has a background in dance or a movement practice that may have become problematic for their relationship to food, exercise, and their body, I would encourage them to think about how beautiful that connection can be when it is serving your long-term health and recovery. So, for instance, dance especially is this incredible experience that we can train our bodies to do, that allows us to have access to connecting to our emotions physically, to expressing things that many people would love to be able to express physically, and also to shift our emotions and energy through movement. It's more and more such an incredible tool that can be utilized for people who have trained in a background of any type of dance, but also for people who don't have that background, being able to access the healing that can be within that art form, whether professionally or recreationally, is incredibly powerful. And I would be so sad if a dancer did not realize the potential power that they have when they are able to truly respect their body and live in recovery and a healthy relationship to their bodies. Because it really is like a secret superpower. Even if you aren't performing, that skill set is in your body and it gives you a different awareness than many people experience. So I want to treasure that and celebrate it. Hopefully that makes sense. That's my way to try to express how I would love to encourage dancers to have a healthy relationship with their bodies.
Thank you so much, Lauren. And I think that it's a great segue for the exciting part of this conversation. So I would really love to shift to our skill building part. So can you walk us through what brain dance is and what this movement exercise is and what it entails?
Sure. Brain dance is a sequence of movements that Anne Green Gilbert, who is a wonderful dance educator, identified to be helpful for our brains and our bodies. I love using brain dance for my clients because it provides a loose structure that many people can adapt based on their movement restrictions, their comfort level, any injuries. And there's really a lot that can be done with this structure of movements that I find could be helpful for someone who may want to access embodiment and movement, but not necessarily do it exactly like me, because maybe my way of moving doesn't speak to that person. Maybe they would prefer a different style, or maybe they have an injury and would like to honor that injury, which I would encourage. So the structure of movements that I'll be walking us through, I've ordered in the way that I present it to my clients, which is not the way that everyone orders this sequence. This is the way that I have found most days the clients that I work with in residential or intensive outpatient settings are able to kind of follow, develop, and then ground into their bodies by the end of it. So I'll share that structure and then we can actually practice it and get into it. Of course, the disclaimer is please, if something hurts, don't do that. So the sequence will today go as follows. We'll be focusing on the breath in some capacity. We'll be moving our upper body. So that could be done seated if that is better for whoever is watching. We'll be moving the lower body. Again, that could be done seated if needed. You might not be able to see my entire lower body, but I'll give you some ideas. Then we'll focus on moving just the right side of the body and then just the left side of the body. Then we'll do something that's called cross-lateral movement. And for those people who know the term bilateral stimulation from EMDR, this is similar in the way that we're approaching crossing the midline and trying to incorporate both sides of the brain. Then we'll do something for our spine. So called head tail, we'll be moving our spine in different ways that feel good to us. We'll do something that is called the core distal. It's not meant to be a core workout, but coming into the core and expanding away from the center, which I like to make sure that folks in recovery know, to make sure that they understand its purpose is a bit different than the exercise that you'd think of for a core exercise. Then we'll do eye tracking, following our thumb or an object to just give our eyes a bit of a different experience. Then we'll work with our vestibular system, which could be done by spinning, circling the head. We'll also have an option of some balancing exercises. And then we'll end with something tactile, which means basically something that makes contact with the body. So that's where we're headed. And I'll give you different ways that you can play with that, each of those as we continue. And I'll be giving some verbal cues that you can listen to also. In general, please don't do anything that hurts and feel free to be creative. You don't have to move just like I'm moving, but I'll give you some suggestions about how to do each of these parts of our structure. I love to give folks the encouragement that if your body, if your recovery needs you to stay seated today, that is absolutely welcome. These can also be adjusted for reclining. It gives a different experience depending on how you're doing those different levels, whether standing, sitting, or reclining, and you can play around with it and see how it feels to you. So we'll begin with breathing. I'm going to give you a moment to just focus on the breath. As you breathe, you might take a moment to just notice how the breath feels today. Maybe there's a technique that you love to practice. Go ahead and take a moment to weave that in. And I'll share my favorite breathing technique that I wish I had learned 20 years ago. You can try this if you'd like. You can keep your hands resting in your lap or somewhere relaxed by your sides. And as we inhale, we're going to just gently open the fingers. And as we exhale, we're going to gently draw them in. So it's like a flower opening as we inhale. And as we exhale, the flower kind of closes up. And we're just breathing at your own pace, allowing the fingers to move with the breath. And if it does not feel useful, you can let that go and just keep focusing on the breath. That is a way to link mind, body, and breath. And for folks who need just a little bit more to focus on, you can close your eyes if you'd like and imagine a visual like a flower opening and closing along with that. We're basically just trying to give our brains enough to focus on to allow our nervous system to settle a little bit. And some brains need more than others. This breathing technique I learned from a yoga therapist, and I love being able to offer it to folks to get them started to understand how small of a movement can be and make a big difference. All right, so then when you're ready, you can let that go. And we're going to go into the next portion, which is the upper body movements. So this is for today, any way that you want to move the upper body. So it might mean that you're moving the shoulders. It might mean that you're moving the arms, stretching, reaching. I like to use the upper body as a way to move in different ways. There's lots of benefit to moving in a way that we don't normally do. So the weirder it is, the better. It doesn't matter what it looks like, especially if you're in the privacy of your own home. And if you add a little bit of force behind it safely, then you can also get the benefit of having novel, potent movement, which can help interrupt anxiety, trauma responses, basically anything upper body. And hopefully by now you're getting the message that this doesn't matter what it looks like. You could put on music and allow yourself to move with the music, or just listen to the silence around you, whatever feels better for you. So in the upper body, I like to remember the neck because so much tension gets held in the neck for many of us. And then the next part of this will be going to the lower body. So for the lower body, I'm going to drop the camera a little bit to try to give some visual. So you could be standing and moving the lower body by lifting the knee, getting some movement in the hips, the legs. You could stabilize with holding on to something and then kick one leg back and forth. For my folks who have a dance background, maybe you involve some of your training here if it feels good, and if not, you don't have to be in training mode. We're just kicking, shaking out the leg. I don't know if you can see that. You also can take a moment to focus on the feet and moving through the feet, pressing through the toes, circling the ankles. You might not be able to hear how much my bones are snapping and cracking over Zoom, but that is happening and that's okay. So you can have a little bit of stomping. You could walk in place. Basically, we're trying to find our lower body, and it's less focused on the upper body, but there's lots of different ways that we can move our lower body. You can do that seated if you need some variations that are not as movement based for the lower body. You could also make contact with the lower body or use a fabric to pull and stretch gently through the hamstrings, the legs, basically waking up the lower body. And then we're going to go into just focusing on the right side of the body. So again, you might not be able to see my right side so much, but I'm balancing on one side and then moving my right side in lots of different ways. So moving the limbs, moving, wiggling, shaking, anything on the right side. I love doing this part with my folks who might feel a little awkward about movement because it's hard not to feel awkward only moving one side of the body. And that's somewhat the point because we're working on using movement as a way to connect to different parts of our brain, connect to different parts of us, and also allowing movement to warm up the body in a way that hopefully feels connected and present. So then when you're ready, we're going to go to the left side. So left side of the body might feel very different depending on how your left side feels today. You can involve the leg and the arm. If you're seated, you can use the chair to stretch and reach with the left leg, the left arm. Lots of different ways to move left side. And this is often where I will feel what differences are present from right to left. And that is just a moment to notice how your body's feeling. When you're ready, we're going to pause, get a little stable after right and left, upper and lower. And now we're going to do something that crosses the midline of the body. So if we think of the midline as running through the nose, belly button all the way down, we're going to bring parts of the body across that midline if you're able to without hurting yourself. So that could mean that you are twisting right to left. You could twist left to right. You could also give yourself a hug, which crosses the midline. I like to do some tapping here because some people may be familiar with butterfly taps as a way to soothe. We're thinking about incorporating both sides of the body at a rhythm that feels comfortable to us. And we can keep it here, or I also learned making a butterfly and placing that on your collarbone, kind of thumb at the sternum, then tapping the collarbone. And if we do that while breathing and slowing things down, that can feel soothing for us. I also use cross-lateral movement, especially the larger ones, as a way to kind of break up any stuck mental process. So if I'm really stuck in indecision, don't know what to do, what to choose, I'll do things that cross the midline, probably fairly energetic just to wake up my brain and see how I feel after that. So crossing the midline is a really fun one. You can also cross upper body to lower body while crossing right to left. If you're standing and you're safely able to cross behind and touch your toe, you can. That one requires a little bit of balancing too. And I also like for those who feel safe in our spines, it's nice to get a twist. And you can also, if you are on the ground, you can do crawling, which is a great cross-lateral movement, which is really great for our brain, as long as it doesn't hurt your knees. So that's some of the cross-lateral options. And now we'll go into head-tail movements. So classically, we would be thinking kind of along the lines of cat-cow in yoga, if you are familiar with that. So thinking about lifting the tailbone, lifting the head, and rounding out so that we're curling in, head towards tailbone. So we're going back and forth with arching and contracting the spine. But I like to also offer folks lots of different ways to move the spine, because if you are sitting and feeling uncomfortable trying that in your chair, then maybe for you, a little side bending would feel good for your spine. Maybe circling the spine. And as long as you're not feeling pain, you can experiment with different ways to move the spine slowly, quickly. I like to play with matching the breath because I also practice and teach yoga. So as I inhale, I might arch the spine open. And as I exhale, drawing in the low belly and rounding out the spine, kind of making C shapes in both directions. But you could play with other ways to move the spine as long as you are not hurting yourself. And then we'll go to the contracting and expanding that comes with core distal, or if we were working with kids, this is often called X's and O's because we're making an O and an X. If you prefer, for my folks who might not feel really comfortable making a giant starfish shape and perhaps knocking lamps, you could also just play with that movement that we did earlier as you inhale, opening the fingers, and exhale, drawing the fingers closed. That'd be a way to start to warm up into this. But over time, we want to see if it's possible to play with bigger contracting and expanding movements. I would personally like to match this with my breath, but it's not required. You don't have to. I like to exhale and curl up. So I won't go all the way away so that you can still see something, but I'm curling up my limbs and my core. And then when I'm ready to inhale, I'm opening up, and you can't quite see my feet, but I'm making a giant X or a starfish. So you can try that at your own pace as long as you don't get lightheaded. If you get lightheaded, you want to back off of that, but slowly contracting and expanding. Again, this could be done in a chair. You could do this lying down, just knowing that we're always aiming to keep conscious of how this feels. It's really easy to do movement in a way that feels disconnected from the body. And if we can stay connected to what our body needs, then we'll know when it's time to pause or take a break. Now, I also like to take a few moments in each of those and see which one feels better on that day. So as I hold the starfish, I might just notice, how does this feel? Most of us throughout our daily life are pretty contracted, texting and curling up. So the starfish, the big distal, meaning distant from the center, that movement or that shape tends to be quite different from the way that we walk around in the world. Personally, I love that, but there are days when it feels like too much. So if you're having too much, then you can come back in and maybe try curling up, see how that feels. Maybe you go into a child's pose. Maybe you curl up in a chair and just breathe, focusing on how that feels. Often with the core contracted here, you can get a sense of sometimes safety, grounding, because what do we do out in the world if we're scared? We contract to protect all of our vital organs. But if we stay there too long, we might get stuck, which is why we want to play with incorporating both if possible. So then I like to shake that off before I go to the next part. And I'll say, even though if I do it in here today, I might knock something over, you don't have to necessarily go so slowly. For many of my clients, that's the way to stay connected to the body, but you could play with faster transitions and see how that feels, as long as you are not needing to restrict your movement, because the faster movements could create a little bit more fatigue. But that's an option down the road. So then we have eye tracking. Now, if you have headaches or there's something about your eyes right now that need to not do this, then you can skip it. But the idea is that we're going to keep our head pretty still if possible, and then use a thumb or another object. Have a truck that I could follow, a little stress ball type toy. And you just start to let your eyes experience a different type of moving. Now, what I like to do might go off screen. I like to make as big of a circle as possible. So I reach my eyes up as far as I can and slowly make my way down into a big, big, big circle. And I switch my fingers so that I can really feel that with my short arms. And you can try that if you'd like, but the pace probably want to be a little bit slow so you don't get too funny feeling there. I also like to use our focal point, shifting from the foreground to the background, unless it starts to feel like too much. So what that would be is focusing on the thumb or an object, and then letting the thumb or object kind of blur out and focusing in the background. This is said to be helpful for interrupting panic attacks. And if I don't have something like a scent or ice, but I have my thumb with me, then I like to just try that and see if it helps. That said, your experience may vary, but it's a simple one that you can try and see if it feels useful. So then you can let your eyes rest for a moment, and we'll go into the last two parts. So for the vestibular system, if you're seated and you need to stay seated, maybe balance isn't so great today, maybe you're just feeling a little uncomfortable, you can stay seated and circle the head and see how that feels, or maybe moving the head side to side, because we are wanting to wake up the system that helps us balance. But for some of us, spinning around may not be the wisest move today. So if you need to take it easy, you could do one of those. If you want to try spinning around, this does not have to be a fancy technique. We are just spinning in a way that feels comfortable to you. And we're not, if you are a dancer by training, we're not actually spotting with this. It's not the goal, because we're actually allowing ourselves to get a little bit dizzy if that's safe. And then we'll reverse and go the other way, kind of unwinding that dizziness. So again, take that one easy if you need to. That one, I like to make sure people know, might not be something you do every single time that you run through these, because there may be days where you feel dizzy or a little wobbly. It's okay to skip that if you need to. You can also take a moment to work on balancing on one foot if you would like. And I tend to recommend this for a lot of my clients, because those of us with ADHD can benefit from balancing. And it was recommended to me that if possible, you also incorporate a cognitive problem while balancing to get the maximum effect. I don't know many cognitive problems off the top of my head, but if you want to play with that at home, I like to go through the alphabet backwards, balancing on one foot, maybe in tree pose from yoga, if you know tree pose. It's a fun thing to play with and see how it goes. Then we'll end with tactile movements. So this is anything that makes contact with the body. It can be done in a pressure and pace that feels right to you. So that might mean that you are dusting things off. It might mean you go back to some tapping, some light rhythmic movements with the fists. You could also, if it feels better, make a squeeze. And this is really based on what feels good to you and your body today. There are going to be some people who prefer more of a light, gentle touch, and some people who prefer more kind of contact and feedback. Just listen to what feels good. And you can do that wherever on the body feels called to make a little contact. I like to end with tactile because for many of my clients, if we end on the vestibular after spinning, we might be a little ungrounded. And so this is my chance to end on a more grounding note for the way that I feel doing this work. That is not how you have to do it. And that's not how everyone does it. I like to also make sure that clients know about just brushing because many clients I work with have an awareness of other people's emotions and energy, and it might land in their body. And so we practice brushing that off as a way to allow our own body and emotion to be more present, not as much taking on other people's emotions. So if you want to try that right now or later, feel free to try that on. And then anything else that feels good to you now that we have taken a moment to go through several different ways of moving. If now that you've started moving, you need to take another stretch, another breath, feel free to do that. And I like to also offer a breath at the end to just center ourselves after going through that sequence. So thanks for trying that today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lauren. That was super helpful. And I hope that our audience and community find it to be helpful too. Well, Lauren, you shared some amazing information today and a lot of messages that I hope that the community, not just dancers, but all those impacted by eating disorders and the coaches and trainers out there. And I hope that people will take it forward and that will use the skill building part moving forward to help promote recovery at home. So to end off today, you guys can head on over to ADTA.org to learn more about the American Dance Therapy Association. And for more information and resources, including our online screening tool, you can head on over to NEDA's website at nationaleatingdisorders.org. Thanks for joining us and take care.
Thanks.